You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play.
Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amber Data. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amber Data delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amber Data eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means we are back once again. It is time to talk a little bit of crypto, a little bit of a market that may or may not have had some action over the past week. Yeah, it's time for the Crypto Rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which all of you folks are binging and mainlining these days. Remember, make sure you're subscribed to the full network wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you want to join us for an awesome pro Q&A all about vol, maybe some Bitcoin vol spilling in there as well tomorrow. Check us out, theoptionsinsider.com/pro Q&A. All about that fun coming at you tomorrow. Of course, Q&As, we've got options oddities at the end of the week, talking all sorts of unusual activity. It's a fun time. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more as we learn who's joining us on the old crypto hot seat this week. Our good pal, Mr. Bill himself, a.k.a. Bill Ulivari from Senecal Capital Management. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you so much for having me back. This is a great pleasure to be with you and the Crypto Rundown family.
Yes, a lot to break down, so you picked a good one. Let's get to it. A little bit of the old Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action since our last show in the world of good old BTC. And spoiler alert, there was a lot. If you're not paying attention to the crypto markets over the past week, I'm not sure what it's going to take to lure you to the dark side because, man, we had a lot of action. The move from show to show completely belies the madness that unfolded in between. On our last show, we were north of 75. We're at 78,415. And even that seemed kind of low because we had just broken through 80K and 85K not too long before that. And then coming into the show today, a wee bit lower than that, 70,825. So down almost 7,600 handles from where we were this time last week. But of course, that really just sets the tone for what happened since our last show. A lot popping off, a lot of volume going up. Of course, towards the end of last week, we had MSTR, aka Strategy, aka what is rapidly become the kind of de facto earnings announcement for the crypto space. It used to be Coinbase. Maybe you could argue it still is Coinbase, but for a lot of people, they are keying off what is going on with Strategy, and they kind of set the tone for all of these digital asset treasuries that are loading up in the space. They had earnings in the after hours. It didn't seem great at first, and Bitcoin had already sold off to 65,000 heading into those earnings. And of course, in the overnight session, we saw Bitcoin sell off all the way down to 60,000, then have a very dramatic turnaround, bouncing off 60K, getting back up to about 65K. We ended up having quite the strong rally in MSTR. We had talked about it on some of our pro content with strangles and some of the levered products, the ones we joke about here on the show, like MSTU, like that Greg likes to trade all the time. A product that I often joke is solely for the degenerates. And if you were trading it on Thursday going into Friday, we were talking about one-day strangles in MSTU, you are certainly on the degen side, but it worked out fairly well. It was wild stuff. We had some crazy action, all that a long way around to saying, Mr. Bill, it's been a wild week in all things Bitcoin. What's been catching your eye, sir?
Oh my gosh. I mean, never has there been a time where we have departed, quote unquote, from fundamentals in the crypto space that I can remember. I mean, pro crypto administration, BlackRock, largest ETF holder of Bitcoin, all the products that are being applied for the administration showing up at, Davos in the World Economic Forum, Scott Bessent being pro crypto. I mean, I don't know what to say other than, oh my gosh, you used the word drama. That is the operative word for cryptocurrency in the last 3 weeks.
Let me ask you this. Do you agree with that supposition? Has MSTR stolen the throne? Are they the kind of de facto earnings announcement for the crypto market now, or is it still maybe Coinbase?
I still think it's Coinbase. I still think it's Coinbase because they do seem to be approaching, they're doing a little bit more in the political space. They're at the White House a little bit more frequently than I think Michael Saylor is. Michael Saylor is hyper focused on the acquisition and accumulation of Bitcoin.
He's just riding his BTC all day. That's what he's doing.
I know. And he just bought another 1,000 or 1,300 for some crazy total holdings that I have a calculator here that I just whipped up vibe coding on Claude, and he currently owns 714,644. They bought another couple of $100 million worth of Bitcoin in the last week. So he is an unrelenting buyer of this stuff. And I'll share with you a little bit more about my spreadsheet. But for normal Bitcoiners, Coinbase is probably the go-to guy. For the amplified Bitcoin, it's got to be MSTR. I mean, the guy he just doesn't stop. And I kind of appreciate that conviction.
Wild rebound off of their announcement. I mean, they pretty much announced they're completely underwater on their Bitcoin holdings now. But what was it, 11,000? I think their average price was somewhere around 76, which is looking a little bit better today than it was when it hit 60,000. But yeah, they said they weren't scared. They were buying more. And I guess the Bitcoin market liked what it heard.
Well, I mean, if you watch the earnings call, it was pretty positive without over pumping and without too much hyperbole for what they're doing. So I thought they did a great job. I really do.
Let's see how that's all being reflected in the market, shall we, listeners? Let's go out to some skew and some vol. Remember, you can crunch all this data for yourselves. It's all free because you like you. amberdata.io or pro.amberdata.io. Get access to that GUI completely for free. If you did that, you would see that things are getting a little spicy in the realm of Bitcoin again. Let's start in the vol, shall we? And the vol was at a little bit shy of a 50 on the weekly vol front last week, 49 up to a 57. So obviously getting a little bit spicier out there. Seeing a similar move out there on the 30-day vol front. We were shy of a 44 on the 30-day vol, which is pretty anemic given everything that's going on. Obviously getting juicier this week. So it went from a 43.9 all the way up to a 51.5 on the 30-day vol. And where the hodlers hang out, aka Michael Saylor and his ilk, at a 46 on the show last week, 49.75 this week. So getting a little bit spicier on the longer term vol front. Mr. Bill, not a surprise perhaps that Bitcoin vol is getting a little bit spicier. In fact, maybe you could argue, given the drama we've seen unfold over the past week and the fact that we do have Coinbase coming up this week, maybe it should be a little bit higher. What do you think?
Well, Mark, the more we talk about institutional adoption to crypto, I mean, remember it wasn't that long ago where Bitcoin implied volatilities were like 120. Then they went to 100, and then they were like 80, and we're like, oh, that's really cheap for Bitcoin. And now they're at, in the low 50s. I mean, there's companies in the S&P 500 with implied volatilities way higher than Bitcoin. So in some respects, it is fulfilling its role as a quote unquote institutionalized, non-correlated asset. And I think that's what's driving people to MicroStrategies and Coinbase and MSTU. Although for the record, I said I wouldn't touch that one with the 10-foot pole on the last episode. But here we got Coinbase Vol, right? I mean, they're the. I mean, if we had to put Coinbase in the same place as internet stocks back in 1999 to 2001, I'm not quite sure which one you would choose. Are they like the next Google or Amazon or Netflix? But their implied volatility is, 80, what do I have? 166 strike, 78, almost 80 vol, pre-earnings. And so, I don't know, Bitcoin is like widows and orphans compared to this other stuff.
Yeah, you joke about the degens. We got pretty degen on the pro last week, Mr. Bill. We were talking about one-day strangles in MSTU. So Thursday, putting them on for Thursday for Friday during the earnings, obviously, of MSTR. And it was a wild time. Good time was had by all, but we fully went into degen mode. You would have been proud of us, Mr. Bill.
Sure. I'm proud of you.
But wild stuff. If you want to check that out for yourselves, listeners, head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/pro. It was a wild time. The skew is reflecting this wild sentiment out here as well. The weekly skew was almost a -9 on the show last week, -8.6. Ticking a full point to the dark side, -9.6. I'll see if I can go dig during the show if I could find our skew levels for how low the weekly skew got during the big sell-off and the bounce off 60K, because that is, of course, where you would have seen the most dramatic skew levels out there, listeners, is that big overnight move. But right now we're looking at 30-day skew, -4.85 on the show last week, -8.5. So looking decidedly bearish in spite of the fact that we had a nice upswing of about 15,000 handles from that 60K level all the way up to nearly 75 right now. Bitcoin 180-day skew, -3 1/3 on the show last week, -5 3/4 today. So wild stuff out there. By the way, I had about a 10,000 point swing from about 60K to a little bit north of 70K, not quite 15. I got a little optimistic. But Mr. Bill, our skew in Bitcoin is showing us that, at least for the near term, the concern is to the downside, sir. Maybe reflecting a little bit of what people are fearing coming out of Coinbase this week. What do you think?
It's hard to say, Mark, because I'm looking, if a stock has an implied volatility, trading at 100, and the implied volatility is, 50, you would say that it's perfectly normal that the stock could trade between 100 and 150 or 100 and down to 50. Like, that's what the implied volatility kind of implies. And here we have the 10-week moving average of quote unquote volatility in Bitcoin. And it's as high as 113,000 on the upside, and on the downside is 63,300. So we have quite a range of volatility in just a perfectly normal statistical range, the bell curve that we like to say. So, I'm surprised. I would think that Bitcoin fear to the downside is like completely gone based on this kind of rally that we saw in the last couple of days. And based on this, what appeared to be capitulation in MicroStrategies and a lot of other crypto things. So, I'm more. I think it's gotten overdone to the downside, and I would like to think that it's going to be a little bit more positive going forward for the next 6 to 8, 10 weeks.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's as bearish as it is. By the way, I took a look while we were talking, Mr. Bill. That weekly skew in Bitcoin got down to almost a -30. Right after the announcement on Friday morning. So that weekly skew was looking pretty dire. And when we hit the 60K level, then of course it rallied all the way up to about a -15 that same day, listeners. So just wild stuff over the past week. Again, if you're just listening to the Crypto Rundown week in and week out, we love you, but you are missing out. A lot of action in between. Speaking of action, Mr. Bill, IBIT has been trading fast and furious. I'm not sure if you noticed, Mr. Bill, but they added some 0-day fun to IBIT these days. They added IBIT to the list of names that were launching last week with the Monday and Wednesday expirations, as well as the Friday. Did you notice this, and have you partaken in them yet? I know you love yourself a little bit of premium harvesting, sir.
I do, but I was focusing more on the application of the ETF where BlackRock is listing a Bitcoin ETF that's going to sell call option premium, of all things. So no, I did not notice the 0 DTE options in iShares or in IBIT. You know, we all have enough on our plate as it is with trading MicroStrategies and these other cryptocurrencies. So this is good. I mean, I'm a new fan, and I appreciate the 1 day, 0 day DTEs, and I will look at them at your request, Mark.
I was mulling them over last week, Mr. Bill. I've been hanging out at a 40 right now, puts it down about 4.5 points from where it was last week. It got a lot lower, got into the high 30s, obviously, heading into that big announcement last week. And I have to admit, Mr. Bill, I was eyeballing the 37.5 puts. They were trading for about 75 cents with about a day to go in the week, and that seemed like a pretty decent return on capital. Again, for a lot of reasons, I ended up not selling those. We ended up trading some of the MSTU stuff instead and talking about that. But also, I was a little bit uncomfortable, Mr. Bill, on what if what ended up happening came to pass, which is we got a not a great number out of MSTR, or the market's response to it wasn't great, and it really took Bitcoin down quite a bit in the after hours. That's exactly what we saw happen. Bitcoin took a bath in the Thursday night heading into Friday morning. And of course, we all know IBIT closes at the closing bell. So you could have a scenario where IBIT could open dramatically lower on Friday morning versus where it closed. So I wasn't in the mood to end up wearing it on some puts and IBITs. I didn't sell them, even though they were, again, 75 cents with 1 day to go. It was very tempting, Mr. Bill. I could hear you on my shoulder whispering to me saying, hit that bid. But I ended up working out pretty well. But I think in the after hours, you probably would have been sweating as Bitcoin crashed down to 60K before recovering. So IBIT putting up some volume today, Mr. Bill, 937,000 contracts. That is the ADV. That is pretty much right in line with what VIX is putting up right now. It's up nearly 250,000 contracts since this time last week. So IBIT and VIX both averaging about 1 million contracts a day right now, putting up 925,000 right now. So another banger. The vol getting spicier again, as you might imagine, up 7 points to a 54. And the hot option in IBIT today is 40,000 of the March 40 puts, going up for about 263, maybe closing. So interesting stuff out there. But Mr. Bill, I could hear you whispering to me last week as I was tempted to hit the bid on those 37.5 puts. Obviously, in hindsight, it would have been a good trade. A little bit of a rough night, overnight, but interesting stuff. And again, the addition of these intra-week expirations now with IBIT, very much changing the game. If you want to do some near-dated premium harvesting, these might be your vehicle, sir.
Well, we used to say in the trading floor, the three richest guys were shoulda, coulda, and woulda. And you should have just closed your eyes and sold a couple of 2, 3 of those 37 or 37.5 puts. And, here's the interesting thing. There's a guy that I follow on LinkedIn and on Twitter. His name is Eric Belchunas. He works for Bloomberg in their ETF division.
He's their ETF guy, yeah. Yeah,
really interesting guy. And he said with Bitcoin being down whatever percent it was from the all-time high, 30% from the high, the IBIT ETF didn't see any redemptions. I mean, they got more order flow, which never happened before. And last year in 2025, Bitcoin or IBT was the only ETF that was negative year to date on their P&L, but actually up $4 billion in assets under management. So I think it's pretty interesting that the story seems to me is that the retail, the public who is buying IBIT, they are not afraid of the downside. I mean, not really. Listen, and also with Bitcoin, what else did we see? We saw, people said that Jeffrey Epstein was a founder of Bitcoin. When the Epstein files came out, we have, MSTR just getting relentlessly beaten down from their shares at an all-time high of 500 and change. And so there was just a lot of bad anxiety out there, I think, in all this crypto space. And I think we saw that capitulation last week, Mark, or Friday to Monday. Just looking at my charts, it looks like things are turning around.
I hadn't heard that Jeffrey Epstein is the founder of Bitcoin.
He's Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yes, that's why it was secret all this time.
What?
Wild stuff, listeners. And you know what? There's always wild stuff in store for us when we explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Altcoin Universe, the portion of the show where things get even more wild, if that's possible, than they were on the show this time last week, listeners. Mr. Bill, sir, wild times in a lot of products, including everyone's beloved ETH. A wild run out here. Coming into start of the show today, 2,131. Down, 580 handles from where it was this time last week. Of course, in the interim, on the nadir last week, we broke 2K. I mean, what a wild sell-off. Talking 4,500 not that long ago, pretty close to it in ETH. Back down to 1,788 last week before recovering ever so slightly out there, but absolutely wild times. What's catching your eye in ETH this week, sir? Again, a wild week.
Yeah, I'm kind of liking Ethereum right here, Mark, and I'll tell you why. If you look at a point and figure chart going back to 2022, you can just draw this most beautiful, perfect trend line from the lower left to the upper right, and Ethereum just stopped right on that trend line. And I think at the last show, when Ethereum was trading in the low threes, maybe mid threes, I had said that statistically, again, just based on implied volatility and historic volatility, it could trade 2,300 to the downside, and we got a little further than that than I expected. But just looking at the chart, if we close between 2020 and 2121 in Ethereum, we're going to put in a column of point and figure X's. And that would seem to validate the trend line going back almost 4 years from my chart that I'm looking at. So I kind of like it. I don't think Ethereum is dead yet. And so I would say premium sellers would probably want to be long delta, collecting a little bit of theta and just waiting for this thing to work its way back up to around 2,850, because there's a technical resistance up there where we had like a triple bottom break according to point and figure rules.
I mean, 1,700, that's a level I didn't think we'd see again for quite some time, and we tickled that last week. So absolutely wild stuff out there. Have you been shaken out of ETH these days, listeners, or are you like Bill? Maybe you're saying, hey, we're seeing the bloodletting, we're seeing the lows, and now I want to pick up some more. I mean, 1,700, geez, that's going to shake out a lot of people. But let's get out there, see what's lighting up the tape right now, listeners. Vol-wise, ETH obviously looking a little bit spicier. 73 on the show last week. 78.25 on the weekly vol, so up 5.25 points there. Hanging out on the 30-day vol front, 64.15 last week. 74.25 this week, so up over 10 points on the monthly vol front. Hanging out where the holders hang out, 180-day vol, 64.75 last week. 71 this week. Let's see what the skew is showing us. Is it showing us that people are still spooked, or maybe all the bears got shaken out down around 1,700? Maybe we are looking positive. Let's see. I don't think so, but you never know. Weekly skew, -5.5 on the show last week, -7.3, so looking still decidedly bearish there. A 30-day skew, -7.9 on the show last week, -6.7 this week, so maybe a slight ray of sunshine there, ticking up ever so slightly. And looking where the holders hang out, -3.4 on the show last week, -3.75 this week. So not exactly a ray of sunshine there. So Mr. Bill, looks like we have a bit of a mixed bag on the ETH skew front out there. Not quite smooth sailing yet, but not quite as dire as it was last week either, sir.
Well, again, I think I'm not that afraid of the downside skew in Ethereum. And I do believe that as someone who does a lot of cash secured put strategies, that looking at the February 2013 put, yeah, it's only 15 cents, but it's trading at, on almost a 100 vol. And even if you were to sell the Feb 2015 put, the 15 put or the 15.5 put, you're collecting 62 cents. You're selling the 77 vol. Looking at the Bollinger Bands and the relative strength, relative strength index just traded all the way down to like 0 in Ethereum 2 days ago. And we're seeing a couple of green candlesticks here. So I think maybe the downside pressure is over, and all it's just going to take is this little rally to close that gap up to, in the iShares Ethereum ETF. I'm looking at the volatility there from the security side. I think that maybe, again, being long delta and collecting a little bit of theta, give yourself a little bit of room. I think that that's, an interesting trade right here. I kind of think the worst damage is done for the time being, unless we get some crazy news story that the Bad Bunny was actually Satoshi Nakamoto. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
We could say it's been a wild week out here in Circle as well. I know if Greg was on here, he's been talking up Circle for a while. He also said a long time ago that he sold the 45 puts as part of a risk reversal expiring, I believe, in March. And we threatened that strike in between now and our last show. Of course, hanging out right now, you'd say, what's the big deal? Circle is actually up $1, trading 60.6. So again, it was a little bit shy of the 60 strike on our last show. But in the interim, we did a lot of downside living, listeners, selling off all the way down to 48.30 in Circle on Thursday before the big MSTR earnings shook up everything in the after hours that night. So wild stuff out there. So again, if you were short those 45s, you were close. You were close to your strike, which is absolutely wild. And then again, of course, from the apex of this stock shortly after its IPO, which was nearly $300, Circle has just fallen all the way back to the earth these days, which is, again, kind of wild. So if you've been trading Circle, you had a pretty wild week out there as well. Maybe you were selling some puts. Maybe it worked out pretty well for you. I'm curious. Hit us up. Let us know. Some folks are trading it up today. 71,000 contracts on the tape. The ADV is up to 107,000. It's up 6,000 from this time last week. And the vol getting spicier as well, as you would expect. Back up to an 89, up about 8 points. The hot trade in Circle right now looks like it's the Feb 70s, but expiring on the 27th. So these are in the weeklies, listeners. Trading about 8,300 times today for $2.34. So maybe if you think Circle has a little bit more upside to go, perhaps you like this. I know, Mr. Bill, you were trading Circle pretty active in the past. What were your thoughts on the big sell-off last week, and what are you up to out there these days?
Gosh, Mark, it reminded me so much of Coinbase after their IPO, where the stock rallied from 50, 60, 70 up to around 340, I think, and then turned around. And during the tightening of Jerome Powell back in 2021 to 2022, as we were entering the crypto winter, Coinbase traded down to $45 a share. It's like almost, it like mirrors Circle, which I think Circle mirrors the Coinbase event. So I'm not saying the bottom is in with Circle, but dang, if history might not repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And I find we got to really keep an eye on these trend lines for Circle. But again, fundamentally, I mean, I encourage everyone to watch the MicroStrategy's earnings call, because when you see how many pro-crypto people are in this administration from A to Z, like every organization inside the U.S. government is like pro-crypto, pro-stablecoin, like this whole thing. And, I think we're talking about internet stocks like they were in 2001 to, 2001 to 2003. Just, man, this is the future, man. It really is. And I think you just got to somehow figure out a way of position sizing and, taking your gains in your call option premium, and maybe you just use that to buy additional shares, some odd lots. But boy, oh boy, I mean, this AI blockchain thing, this is it, man. This is the future. It really is. I think you know that, and I know that, and everybody seems to be saying that.
Well, let's see what they're saying in the rest of the altcoin universe for this week, listeners. It was a wild one. Let's go out to Solana. A lot of you maybe have already jumped ship from ETH to Solana. If you did, you were riding the sinking ship last week as well. 104.18 on our show last week. 88.89 this week, down another 15.25 handles. But that even belies the story. The low last week for Solana, $71. So they really took Solana down. So a lot of people who were excited about getting Solana below 150 again, maybe even $125. You had your chance to nibble at 71 if you were pretty brave last week, and even still back below a 90 handle right now in Solana. So wild stuff out there. XRP, Bill's wife won't want to hear this part. 164 on the show last week, 145 today, so down 19 cents. Of course, in the interim, things got pretty bleak in XRP as well, down to $1.16 out there in XRP. So pretty wild stuff. Doge 10.8 cents last week, 9.6 cents this week, down about 1.2 cents. Litecoin 60.1 on the show last week, 54, roughly 54 and 3/4 this week, so down a little over 5, about 5.30. Got as low as $47 last week. So again, if you could stomach stepping into the fray last week, you had some deals, at least for the near term, in a lot of these assets out here. Cardano, 30 cents on the show last week, 27 cents today, so down about 3 cents. Got as low as 23 cents last Thursday. Polkadot, similar stories for most of these. $1.56 on the show last week, $1.33 today, so down about 23 cents. And then everyone's beloved Shiba Inu, 1,000,069 last week. This week, 1,000,061. So taking it on the chin out there. I don't have the number for the low and the Shiba. I'm not sure if I want to read it, even if I did, just to depress everyone. But Mr. Bill, a wild time last week. If you had the cojones to step into the firestorm on some of these assets last Thursday and last Friday, you're having a good week. What's catching your eye in the rest of the altcoin universe right now, sir?
Well, I've got two altcoin favorites. One of them, again, is a repeat from last week, last time I was on the show, which is the Canton Network. The Canton Network that token's only available right now on the Kraken exchange. And it's, again, a public blockchain platform for financial institutions and tokenizing assets, stocks, bonds, and securities. They are in I'm going to call it a beta test partnership with the Depository Clearing Corp. And I think that's really interesting. The market cap is $6.2 billion, trading around 16.5 cents per token. I think it combines, speed and privacy, which is really important. Privacy in a fast infrastructure. And again, we have our friends at DRW, at least according to my research on Claude, that and a half a dozen other names that are familiar in financial services are backing and involved in this project. So that's my first meme. Not my meme, but my first altcoin. And the second one, you're going to kill me for saying this. It's MicroStrategies, okay? And why do I say that? Because I did a quick little interactive chart, again, vibe coding something on Claude, and I'm trying to figure out a way of calculating like a net asset value, like the number of Bitcoin that MicroStrategies holds versus the price of Bitcoin, because they are a treasury company, right? And so everybody's talking about something called MNAV, like the market net asset value of how MicroStrategies is always selling above a 1.1 NAV. And, we saw it as high as 3.0 times their Bitcoin holdings. Well, the all-time low the all-time best value in MicroStrategies was during crypto winter in June of 2022. The relationship between the stock price, the number of shares of Bitcoin that they held in treasury, and the price of Bitcoin was about 49% under value, right? So their shares were 49% under their the value of the market price of their holdings. And again, Mark, you might remember back in the 80s, there were companies traders were coming in, buying stocks, liquidating them under book value, and then taking the profit. Like those were the big corporate raiders of the 80s. And so I'm trying to think that, when I did my calculator the other day, when MicroStrategies was trading between 106 and 110, it was around 29% under net asset value. And I use that term very loosely because I'm trying to find some kind of metric I can use to determine whether or not MicroStrategies is overbought, oversold, or neutral. And there's only twice in its history of the last 6 years where it's been this low compared to its Bitcoin holdings. So it's not science. It's just something I kind of pulled out of my back pocket. But it does seem to be that the all-time high of the number of shares that you could buy of MicroStrategies with respect to Bitcoin was around 620, and that's dropped about 100. So now 521 shares of MicroStrategies represent one Bitcoin. But don't forget, you get amplified Bitcoin. So you get like a 1.4 beta stock for almost under net asset value. And I think that that's kind of interesting. And if anybody wants to reach out to me and talk about it, that's fine. I just think that MicroStrategies, this latest sell-off, unless there's something behind the green door, that's going to be my meme token for the rest of 2026.
Interesting. Little MSTR ratio trading out here. I was looking while you were talking, sir, at your Canton Network listener, which again you can get on Kraken if you are intrigued. CC, I believe, is the symbol. And unlike most of the other assets out there, Mr. Bill, it didn't really get annihilated last week. It's about 16.4 cents right now, and it was about 16.4 cents during the sell-off last week. So it got a little higher before that, got up to 19 cents. So I suppose you could say it came down about 3 cents, but unlike most other assets, it didn't really get annihilated last week. So maybe perhaps that is a bit of a shot in the arm for that asset. Maybe that makes you more intrigued, listeners. One of the few assets we're looking at right now that didn't get slaughtered and is still trading about the same price right now that it was this time a week ago. All right, Mr. Bill, that is going to do it for us on the crypto rundown this week. A lot of fascinating stuff going on out here in the world of crypto. Again, just listen to the show if you missed anything. And maybe some of you are having a rough start to the week right now because it was just a wild and tumultuous time last week. But hopefully a lot of you have your heads above water and you're actually doing pretty well out there. And in the meantime, Mr. Bill, like you said, if folks are intrigued by some of these ratios you're talking about, maybe they want to reach out to you to learn more, where should they go? What should they do?
Sure, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. Bill Ulivari. They can go to www.Cenacle Capital. That's CENACLE, cenaclecapital.com. And just talk about what we're doing here. So we also have a really new, interesting strategy that I can maybe talk about with you some other day. It seeks to find network effect founder-led companies, and like MicroStrategies and Amazon and Coinbase, and people where the founders like Brian Armstrong and Michael Saylor and others are at the forefront of leading their company, and the returns are pretty remarkable, back tested, like going back a few years. So it's just something we're kind of rolling out now as a part of our offering. So cenaclecapital.com, LinkedIn, and I really appreciate the opportunity for me to talk a little bit about what we do.
And of course, while you're checking things out online, check out our friends over there at AmberData, pro.amberdata.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. That's going to do it for us on the Crypto Rundown this week. Back again after the closing bell to break down all the action in the world of options on the Hot Options Report. Then we're back again with our usual array of content until we're back again next Monday. Another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amber Data. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amber Data delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amber Data eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play.